In your mind, what is your definition of masculinity and why is it important to the church?
I see many general authorities saying, brothers, love your wife, make it easy for your wife to love you or whatever. But also, I never saw a talk addressing women in those same aspects.
The way that the world works and the way that Satan tries to divide us, it's like you can't promote a woman without denigrating a man, and then vice versa. And it's like, wait, no, you don't have to do that.
I'm not into like super conspiracy theories, but I think there's definitely some type of war against men. I think somehow they're trying to advertise the idea, oh, it's okay to be weak, it's okay to be uncertain about your sexuality, and I think some people are investing too much time and money to make that idea stronger.
Do you feel that the church is kind of leaving men behind? Welcome to the Rock and Roll Fireside featuring Brother Jacob's Jams. I am your humble host, Kyle Jacobs. You guys, I am so stoked here. Today we've got John Rodriguez from the Saints and Lumberjacks social media page. John, how you doing today, bud?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me over. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you guys are not familiar with his Instagram page, you got to hit it up, Saints and Lumberjacks. And John talks about a whole myriad of things, bodybuilding, to the Second Amendment, to the Constitution, to overall masculinity. And that's kind of what we want to talk about today. So, John, thanks again for joining me today. So I wanted to ask you, in your mind, what is your definition of masculinity and why is it important to the church?
Well, Kyle, I growing up, I didn't grow up with my father. So back in Brazil, I grew up with my mom, my grandpa, but my dad, he was not in the picture like super often. I knew who he was, but we didn't have a very close relationship. So when my son was born 4 years ago, I started I started recognizing a few things in my life, and I ended up, understanding that boys, they need a figure in their lives. And I also started to think about my past and how the absence of my father impacted me. I know, like he was a cool guy. I don't have anything bad to say about him. He was just not very present.
Mm.
So with that, I ended up trying to forgive my father, to understand that what he had to give me, what was his best, and that I could do a lot better in my life when I had the chance, But also looking back, like when we think about the history of the foundation of the United States and all the wars that we've been, we had men going to war, to fight, or build a legacy, and throughout the years we can see like men losing that values, like they're becoming less connected with the idea of being masculine. We always like we see obviously as well like men becoming more soft throughout the
Mhm.
years, especially teenagers right now. So I think it's important to save those values, because men are made to be men, women are supposed to be women. They are not better than each other, but I think they make each other like they need each other to, you know to be complete, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally does. And I really like what you pointed out there that, just the equality of it. The way that the world works and the way that Satan tries to divide us, it's like you can't promote a woman without denigrating a man, and then vice versa. And it's like, wait, no, you don't have to do that. We can lift each other up and it's okay,
Yeah.
And it's a funny thing because I had to talk to my daughter about this as she was growing up. She's 11 years old right now, and we had the talk with her, and really what prompted that was I recognized that in her vocabulary and in just some of the things that she would say these things that were, that were just like poking fun at boys. And I think, especially when you're in grade school and even older, boys versus girls, that's a natural type of thing. But, when I hear things like, oh, boys are just dumb, or, oh, they're just a boy, and, I can do anything without a boy, and things like that. That's where I'm like, whoa, we're getting to a sticky spot here, And so when we had that talk with her, the birds and the bees, we let her know, like, look, we cannot get through life. Life cannot continue without each other,
Mhm.
and we had to intentionally push back on just the media that is out there, whether you're watching Disney Channel or Netflix or just anything that pops up. It's all hammering on boys and in the name of women power. And I'm like, and so the conversation that we had, my daughter was just so great with it and fully understood and fully embraces it, was that, look, women can be strong and wonderful, but that doesn't mean that men are not needed, So, and it was fascinating to me to see how the media and entertainment portrays men and useless or stupid or just not necessary. And I think that's one reason why I really wanted to talk with you, because I'm like, we
Yes.
have to push back on that.
Yes, I will eventually will get to the points that I would like to say, but I've
Yeah.
seen that clear, around people around me. Yeah, I've seen that super well.
Yeah, yeah. So question for you here, and this is a little bit. I don't want to say it's a controversial question. I'm so afraid of
Oh, I
like,
love controversial
yeah,
questions.
but I want to make it clear that this question isn't rooted in any type of
No,
criticism against the church or anything like that, because so I'll just go out and say it. I put asterisks on everything here, but
sure.
do you feel that the church is kind of leaving men behind? And what I mean by that is something that I've noticed is all of these great, wonderful things where we've got, lots of relief society, general relief society meetings that are happening. They get together, they do these things, and that's a wonderful thing. That I don't want that to stop. That is so needed. We haven't had a priesthood session since 2019, and
Yeah.
I see all these things where I'm like, man, don't forget about the elders. We need help. What's your take on that?
Kyle, to be honest with you, something that I noticed throughout my long years as a member of the church, and man, like I've been a member for like basically since I was born. I just got baptized when I was 12, but I've been a member of the church ever since. So I love the church. The church gave me a direction in my life in Brazil. But throughout the years, every general conference, I've seen a pattern on the talks. And what I see many general authorities saying, brothers, love your wife, make it easy for your wife to love you or whatever. But also, I never saw a talk addressing women in those same aspects.
Mm,
Because truth is, there are many marriages falling apart because of women as well. I don't want to
hmm
go super deep in that, but obviously, like it's our duty to be the head of a house and lead with confidence and respect. But at the same time, I've seen many uh, marriages or situations going really bad because of the sister or a woman, because of hard behavior or something abusive. I don't know. But I know that there are very good men inside church who are who are not being respected or even being abused by women. And I don't see that being addressed on talks on church. It's I feel like the talks that I've seen over the past years, they always somehow try to put men as the be- betrayers of all bad stuff that happens, and that is not true.
Yeah.
That's my take on that.
Yeah. And it's tough. I'll tell you, one of my favorite talks in this past conference was from for Brother Lund. He was the president of the Young Men's. And that was one of the first talks that I had seen in many years that was really building up young men. And so I invite everybody to review that talk. We'll put the link in the description of this video here. But it was so it wasn't just like giving us high fives, man, you're awesome. But it was like, young men, you are needed. And even Elder Holland, that talk that he gave, about the boy who was with the deacon passing sacrament and could barely crawl up the stairs. Those were some of the first ones where I'm like, yes, there's some good highlight here to the good side of men, and like honoring the priesthood and things like that. And it was a breath of fresh air for me. But I still had the thought, like, okay, now do the elders quorum. Like, we need something. To me, I don't know what your thoughts would be here on how do we fix this? But in my opinion, the general authorities, they're obviously being inspired by the Lord. I do think there is a lot of society and the things that happen in society that help them know which way to go on their talks.
Hmm.
Um, and society right now is really very woman centric. And so maybe that's the reason why we haven't seen a lot of talks lately about that. But
Yeah.
we can't control the general authorities. We are not that inspired. What do you think we should do, just at the local level, to kind of help raise our hands in defense of men and masculinity?
That's a really good question. I think like growing up, I always heard that education starts at home.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're a dad or a mom, I think it's your duty like to observe this situation and try to do some work with your own kids. You know, before trying to take that to church or other places. Like try to work first in your family and then with
Mm-hmm.
friends or other people. But I think it's always important to to have a community of brothers and young men where we can talk freely about life and
Mm-hmm.
issues that we face as men in the world. I think building a community and being uh, like how do I say it? Like being in the moment with our kids and trying to make them understand what we face in the world today.
Yeah.
That's how I would approach the word because like the topic because I only have one son and he's 4 years now, and I try to leave him small hints about this topic and try to help him to understand like, okay, I'm a boy, what things
Mm-hmm.
boys do, what like having those conversations with him.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I think the key word there is intentional. Like as parents, as dads, especially, we have to be intentional with how and what we teach our kids. And I think, I've been blessed with a daughter and a son, and we have
Yeah.
those conversations together. And again, we've got the lighthearted, like boys versus girls. Yeah. And no one feels like put down by that, and it also, uh, I, I intentionally do that so that my son can feel proud to be a boy. And, and
Mm.
we'll go out and I'll even say like, hey, we're going to do something manly today. And he'll be like, yeah, manly, really kind of wrapping our arms around that, because the world is giving him all sorts of crap about who he is, and we have to specifically combat that. And I got to give a shout out to my wife on that too. I think maybe it's like turning an aircraft carrier that's just super slow, but there have been more women that certainly I've been around and that I've seen who are starting to say, like, guys, this whole feminism thing is a massive overcorrection. And we're
Yeah.
seeing some women be able to say to their sons, it's okay to be a boy, and so my wife is so awesome at that because, we have conversations, we've got, meetings that we have together every week to, like, hey, how are the kids doing? And we're both on that same page. And I think we need help from the women to help us to say, like, hey, you know what? If, give your son the groceries to carry, through, because you need big, strong muscles to do that, even stuff like that. And your
Yeah.
son gets the idea, oh, I need to help women. I need to use my body to protect and defend, and anything that I can do, to be able to be the man of the house. My son's only 7 years old, and anytime I leave, I let him know, like, hey, you're the man of the house. He's like, okay. He takes it super seriously, and my wife helps water that seed. I think we absolutely need the help of the women to be able to take care of that.
I completely agree. Now my son, he's already like, I take Russell to the gym with me, and he's already
Nice.
r- wrapping his arms around the idea of, oh, daddy, I'm strong. I'm gonna be taller than you.
Yeah.
And, daddy, when I watch this, and he will go catch a dumbbell or something, like he's already,
Yeah.
understanding that idea of being present, being strong in order to help others. Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. And again, it has to be intentional. It has to be consistent. And, I hope it goes without saying, maybe it doesn't, that, masculinity isn't just like dominate, it's not a domination of women.
No.
And that's what the world tries to say. Like, all masculinity is toxic because, it's the star quarterback jock who picks on everybody. And so they try to portray that that's what masculinity is. Like, no, that's just being a jerk. Here's what masculinity is. And it's being selfless. It's being responsible, so anything that we can do to teach our kids that, you've got a unique perspective here. And so I think this question is really excellent for you. Those men and young men who have not grown up with a masculine figure in their life, and maybe, they're never gonna be this lumberjack dude, Navy SEAL type of guy, which that's not, you don't have to be that in order to be masculine. But let's say there is somebody out there who wants to be more masculine, who wants to embrace that role a little bit, but has no idea where to start. Where would you start him on that path?
Something that I had to do on myself because I didn't have like a very strong father figure. So I had to look that in other guys. I
Yeah.
would have find that missing piece in other men, and I would build that, that puzzle from pieces that I would get from other guys. So if there was something that I felt I was missing, I would try to identify that in a friend or a close friend or a church, like a neighbor, and I would try to learn that from him. And I would try to surround myself with other, men, like good men. And I would try to live my life at least for the last 1 or 2 years by doing that until I understand that concept of being a man and being um, responsible. And I also would try to understand the idea of trying to love the idea of work,
Mm.
because most guys, and especially myself years ago, I didn't. I When I was 20, 21, I had a hard time with the word job.
Yeah.
I know I had to work to pay my bills, but I, like, deep inside, I didn't understand the concept of, okay, having a job, it's what build character. It
Yeah.
what it is what gives me the chance to keep my life going. I feel like having a work or having a job is very, very important to any young man in
Hmm.
this world.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think the idea, and I absolutely love that because I don't know about you, but it sounds like it's the case. I am naturally lazy, where it's like, hey, if I don't have anything to do, if I don't have a single responsibility, I am going to kick back, which is, I think, another one of the dangers of feminism, because feminism says men are not needed. And that already, it's like hitting your knee, the reflexes already. Like, if I'm not needed, I'm just going to go play Nintendo and rot on that couch. And so I love the idea of like, find a job, any type of responsibility. And I think it's important to let the young man know, or even if it is, maybe he's a return missionary and he's like, man, I want to embrace this a little bit better. I'm looking to be a dad and a husband, and I need to do that. Give them a responsibility that will absolutely fail if they don't do it. So,
Hmm.
and I'll let my son know that too. Like, hey, if you don't do this, it will not get done, and we're all going to suffer for it. And the things I give him are just small things, but like, hey, this won't get done. And it is almost a switch that flips in his brain, and I can see it where he's like, oh, and then he goes to work, man. It's natural within us. We have to be pushed a little bit. So I think anybody who has any type of responsibility or stewardship over young men, especially if you are in the young men's program, because we don't have scouts anymore. And the Boy Scouts of America, they went off the rails, and that's really, really unfortunate. And I understand why the church had to cut ties with the Boy Scouts. I wish there was something more that was more structured and like, here's the responsibility. So if you're in the young men's organization in any way, give them responsibilities, give them things that can fail, and let them fail and let them see that. Because I know for me, my dad taught me how to work, and, we had horses in the backyards. We had to buck bales and shovel horse poop and the whole 9 yards. And like, if we didn't do it, it didn't get done. And all the consequences to that. So I think that's a really important aspect of it for
Yeah,
sure.
that's right.
Yep. And the other aspect, so girls, this is for you. We love to know that we are appreciated, and it's
Yeah,
even if we mess something up, right? if we tried to do something and maybe we're like, oh, this didn't look good. We want to feel appreciated. We want to feel like, hey, I love that. Oh, I couldn't have done this without you. That type of thing. It is inherent, I think, within our spirits that we're like, okay, and it causes us to rise to that occasion.
that's right. I think there's nothing more dangerous to a relationship or a family is when the dad is trying to do whatever he can to provide for that family, and he doesn't see his efforts are being appreciated by his wife or their kids. That actually kills a man, uh, really bad.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. So, with that being said, what would you say is the biggest threat to masculinity?
Wow, I think social media, I think politics in general, I would say I'm not into like super conspiracy theories, but I think there's definitely some type of war against men. I think somehow they're trying to advertise the idea, oh, it's okay to be weak, it's okay to be uncertain about your sexuality, and I think some people are investing too much time and money to make that idea stronger today. So like schools these days, you have to be
Mm-hmm.
really careful, like what your children are being taught at school. You
Yeah.
know, It just like I mean, I would say the whole environment is definitely trying to destroy the idea of family, of
Yeah.
um, masculinity in general, because it's
Right.
easy. Yeah, it's easier to have people, you know, uh, under control when they don't have that idea of I'm capable, I'm strong, I can do hard things. You know.
Right. And it hurts the women too, because uh, no matter what you try to pitch, masculinity in any form is necessary for society.
Yeah.
Just like what you talked about, like when you think about like the wars that needed to be fought, our independence needed to be won. Those are masculine traits. And so when you
Yeah,
tear down masculinity and when you tear down the men, the women feel that they need to embody that. And so now all of a sudden, everything is on women and they can't handle it. Neither could we. That's why there's a separation there. And so it's like, again, I've mentioned it before. I think the biggest threat to masculinity is the feminist movement. And,
yes,
and, and I think feminism, they have been poisoning themselves. It's not just like tear down men, but it's hurting themselves because it's like, you guys, nobody is meant to carry every single burden. And so when you take men out of the picture and like, okay, I'm a boss lady now and I'm a family lady and all these things, it's like, you can't do that. You just
yeah,
can't. Now, you know,
yeah.
with degrees,
That
obviously, but yeah.
yeah, and that honestly, that's super unattractive for men when
Uh
they're like
huh.
gets to know like a girl who calls herself like a boss babe or a boss lady,
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah.
Yep.
It anyway.
Yeah. Well, and I really love. So we've hit on this a couple times before, and I would just add to your answer a couple back where we're like, how do we get somebody to embrace their masculinity or to develop masculinity? I love history. I
Mm,
love reading about, especially the American Revolution. All these things, and I think, man, if we can get more people interested in history, in specifically American history, um, you would see the necessity. Like the Americans beat the British, not because we were so crackerjack shots and we're like this
yeah.
mighty military thing, but we could go through hard things. And the British were sick of it. It became a war of attrition because they're like, we are done with this cold, frigid temperature. We're not, we don't like all this work. And we worked, and we didn't back down. And to me, I'm like, that is masculinity. And so I always get pumped up when
Yes.
I read history.
Yeah, I love the story. Yeah. Like for me, as like I grew up in Brazil, and we like throughout the history of Brazil, we never had anything close to the story of the foundation of the United States. So when I start like understanding how the country was founded, like how the founding fathers fought for the freedom, that was what actually got me most hooked about America, because that story is just like, it's amazing how they
It's
did. Yeah,
miraculous.
yes, yeah, it's how do I say, I think putting, giving the chance to our kids to understand that story would definitely impact their lives, because they're so lucky to live in this country.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's very important to them to understand how this country was built, how it was founded, and all the freedoms and rights that we have today, because men in the past chose to be men. They went to war, they fought, they died, they killed, but here we are.
Yeah, absolutely. So you touched on a little bit of your backstory here,
Yeah,
because I was very interested in like how from Brazil, how did you get interested? Your social media page is very much Constitution, very much Second Amendment and things like that, and so it's neat to hear that history played a big role in that. So
yeah.
what do you hope to accomplish with your Saints and Lumberjacks social media page?
So Sensing Lumberjacks is it's a arm of a bigger page that I have in Portuguese. So I actually started creating content back in 2020. So I have another page where I post the same type of content, but in my language.
Mm-hmm.
And it has grew up. It has grew a lot over the years. So growing up in Brazil, like we didn't have the right to basically to keep a firearm at home.
Right.
So we don't have anything close to the Second and First Amendment in Brazil. So I remember that the topic about firearms has always been hard in Brazil, because we were under like a communist regime for many many years,
Hmm.
and they didn't like the idea of people having firearms, at home. So
Naturally.
we understand why that. So when I came to the United States, I was first living in Utah, and I noticed like how safe and how peaceful it was here. But at the same time, I knew people had firearms here, and I saw all these gun stores, where people could buy firearms so easy, which is something that we don't have in Brazil. Like, in order to
Yeah.
have a firearm in Brazil, you have to go through a very hard process. You have to apply for licenses and go through the federal police and background checks and psychological evaluations. You have to be older than 25, and it's a whole process. And when I and I knew that guns were easy to get in the United States until, but I didn't understand why. And that's how I came across the story of the Second Amendment and the foundation of the country. So first, my page was idea that I had in order to teach people in Brazil about the responsibility of having a gun at home.
Yeah.
That is a tool that you use to protect your life, your family. But as time passed by, as my page started growing, I also noticed that people, like, they were connecting to me not only because of the Second Amendment, but also because bodybuilding and my story in the gospel and in the church. So at the end of the whole experience, my page just became a mix of things that I believe, which orbits around bodybuilding, freedom, the church, the Second Amendment, and all this stuff that I love.
Yeah. Ah, that's awesome. And I love how things kind of build organically where you're like, hey, I want to talk about the Second
They,
Amendment, but like, oh,
yeah,
but all these other things, and you're
yeah,
like, that's inspiration, man.
yeah. They linked to a point, to another, and
Yeah. You
I've
know,
hmm?
I love the idea, and I can't remember who said it or anything like that, but it's a common idea that like all truth is a part of the gospel, and so I think that for content creators who are trying to share the gospel, I think it is natural to veer into especially American principles. I'm a sucker for that type of thing, but those principles are based on God and things of that nature. But I think it's a natural thing to say, like, you know what? I've seen a lot of content creators talk about health and like nutrition and things like that. I'm like, because that's truth, and as members of the church and as followers of the gospel, we're attracted to all truth. And obviously that doesn't mean that everything is true, but if it's true, man, we seek after it. And so I absolutely love that. What would you say to somebody who fights back against masculinity, who says that masculinity is toxic and is no longer needed? What is your message to them?
Kyle, there is a quote that I heard a long time ago. I will try to translate this to make sense in English, but um, I believe personally that masculinity itself cannot be toxic, because the masculinity that we see in the Bible, it fights all sorts of harm and evil. So masculinity itself cannot be toxic, because by its nature, it's something that was created to protect and love. So I think I think when you try to see masculinity through the lens of the gospel, I think you understand that masculinity and femininity, they are part of the plan of salvation. They are like, they walk together. I think there's a war. A lot of people they try to make harder today for men and women to collaborate with each
Yeah.
other. Somehow there's some like this sort of bias against men, that we don't need men, that or whatever. But I think once you understand that we were made to work together as a team, that's when we understand everything, about how important it is to have men and women, together in the world today.
Yep, absolutely. Well, John, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. You guys, don't forget
Well, Kyle,
don't forget to like and subscribe to the Rock and Roll Fireside, and share with your friends. And also, don't forget to go to Saints and Lumberjacks, and don't forget to live with faith and courage. We'll see you next time.